Hey everybody, welcome back to Council Sessions right here on YouTube channel here on Inside the Force. I am Dave Cottingham here with Cyber Ren, Martin Donison. How are you, sir?
Doing good, but I feel like we haven't talked in a while, and that's because there's a lull in Star Wars right now, but it's good to be here.
There is a little bit, but I want to definitely get this on the docket because we've got a very highly anticipated series, I would say, coming out here in a few weeks.
Oh, yeah.
Called Ahsoka, based on a very, very popular character. Now, coming up, through the Clone Wars and Rebels and just living in animation, she is now coming full force into live action. Showed up in Mandalorian a little bit, but to have her own series is unbelievable. I never thought something like this would happen from a little Padawan back in the Clone Wars.
Yeah, exactly. That didn't have a good start.
That's right.
Wasn't very popular to begin with.
She had to grow on people for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I want to center around this discussion about some comments made in a video that was put out by StarWars.com and on YouTube. They come out with these little featurettes, these like 2-minute featurettes that are promoting kind of a behind the scenes look at what went into the idea of making a series. I think Andor had one, Obi-Wan had one, and there's one out there called Journey to Ahsoka. It has the / Disney Plus on it, but it's on YouTube. It's on the Star Wars' YouTube channel. And as it goes, as you were watching it just now, it kicks off with, Rosario Dawson on Good Morning America, I think it was.
Yeah, it's like a history of where this all started. Yeah.
Correct. I think that was maybe a couple years ago, because she was talking about how the internet was saying that she should play the live action version of Ahsoka. So it's another fan casting that happened out there in the Star Wars world. And of course, Filoni, was the creator with George Lucas of this character, listened to the fans and I guess tried it out and it worked out. Now, the thing that we're going to talk about in this episode is a comment that he makes about 45 seconds in, where he says, Ahsoka, here I'm going to read the exact, he says, "We're telling the story of this character who's been trained by the greatest Jedi of all time in Anakin Skywalker." So bold comments, right? Okay. So we'll get into your thoughts here, but I think that was the premise of it, because I remember seeing this when it first came out a couple weeks ago, and then immediately on social media seeing, wait a minute, did he just say Anakin's the greatest Jedi? Wait, how does he think does he actually think that, or is he? I mean, I truly think that Filoni believes that, or else he wouldn't have said that. So that's what we're going to talk about right now, Cyber Ren. We're going to talk about, is what he's saying accurate, and what reasons are not that we think Anakin is or isn't the greatest Jedi. So I'll pass it to you first and just simply kind of make your own argument. Is what Filoni is saying true?
How long you got tonight, man? This could be our longest council session ever.
Hey, that's fine.
Because you presented me the question today, so I could start thinking about it, and I came up with so many angles that we could look at this from, because I don't think there's one definitive answer, yes or no. I just wanted to point out, now that we're live on video, you'll notice the Anakin ambiance I got going on. You see all the red behind me?
And you got the
and I don't know if
Vader t-shirt, right?
Isn't that perfect for Anakin? Come on.
Yeah.
Not a people person.
Not a people person. It's a picture of Vader. Yeah.
Okay. Like I said, I think it depends on what angle you come at, because you could say yes from some certain points of view, and I love that saying for Star Wars, and you could say no way from other certain points of view. Let's go back to what you guys have heard me talk about before first. I love the Clone Wars. Anakin is my favorite character from the Clone Wars series. Mm-hmm. And because of that, for the way he was displayed in Clone Wars, I will say, yes, he is the greatest of all time. But it's from, this, of course, personal favorites comes into play too. But I'm going to break this down. The reason I think Anakin is the greatest of all time based on his Clone Wars appearance is because we are seeing Anakin at the height of his abilities when he's come into full power. This is why Emperor Palpatine comes after him, because Palpatine acknowledges and recognizes, whoa, this kid is awesome. I should get him under my wing. I mean, what's his name? Holy, I'm just totally blanking. The guy who finds him in Phantom Menace. Qui-Gon, thank you. Wow. Qui-Gon acknowledges and recognizes him as possibly the one, pulling from the Matrix, the chosen one. But my own personal opinion is we see Anakin do things that no other Jedi can do, whether it's piloting a ship, whether it's doing acrobatic stunts with a lightsaber, whether it's falling from 500 stories up and landing safely on his feet, whatever. The abilities that he shows is one angle that you could say he is the greatest of all time, because I don't think any other Jedi have really displayed the type of maneuvers and the type of abilities and the way he can use the Force to his great advantage. That alone, I think that one aspect makes him the greatest of all time in that area of skill. Mm-hmm. That's one way to look at it. Now, I'm probably going to throw a bunch of these at you, so you can interject, and you can just wait, and then we can touch on them one at a time. Is Anakin the greatest of all time when it comes to his knowledge of the Force? I don't think so. There, obviously, when you compare him against Obi-Wan, who later trained him, when you compare him against Yoda, nobody knows more than Yoda. I would say when you're talking about sheer knowledge of the Force and everything involved between good and bad, I don't think you can beat Yoda hands down. I know Yoda is your favorite, and you probably have an argument for him coming up as to why he's the greatest of all time. A lot of people think Obi-Wan Kenobi's the greatest of all time. Now, there's an argument there as well, because Obi-Wan, and I think we've discussed this before, Obi-Wan is the only Jedi that never turned, never questioned, out of all the ones that we know, he never, ever faltered at all from his path on the light side. No matter how difficult the circumstances, Obi-Wan stayed true to the light side.
That's right.
That's where Anakin fails, because Anakin, led by his emotions, allowed himself to be manipulated by Palpatine, turning him to the dark side. So does that mean he's the greatest of all time? No, because he lost control, couldn't handle his emotions, and he got turned over. So there's so many angles you can look at it. I'll make part of the argument for you. I mean, just Yoda's longevity, 800 years of life. He knows an awful lot about the Force that nobody else will have that kind of knowledge. But I believe we brought this up before as well. Yoda, along with the rest of the Jedi Council, they kind of get stuck in their ways, and they kind of get stuck behind these sacred rules and traditions and beliefs, and they don't allow themselves to open up and to feel and to care and to show compassion. And I think that's where Anakin maybe is better, because he leads by emotion. I remember on our last Inside the Force that I joined you guys on, I talked about how the Jedi have evolved and changed, and what we see with Rey now, between Anakin and Luke and Rey, like emotion, these guys allowed emotion to help them in the Force and help them hone their Jedi powers. And again, Anakin just lost control. So anyway, I'm starting to ramble now, but I think those are the different aspects that we have to look at: is skill and ability, strength in the Force, knowledge of the Force, staying true to the Force. These are all different angles, and I think Anakin can be considered the greatest in some of them, and definitely not in others. So,
right. Yeah, those are all valid points. I think, with him being a Jedi, because I think that's where I start thinking about whether or not this statement is true or not. Mm-hmm. Because when he turns and becomes Darth Vader, we're not talking about Anakin Skywalker anymore. He's a Sith at that point.
Right.
So the question becomes, is the body of work, because that's how he that's how we look at goats, right? The greatest of all times is we look at their body of work.
Yeah.
And his body of work from when he's 9 years old, discovered by Qui-Gon, like you said, trained by Obi-Wan, up until Revenge of the Sith when he becomes Darth Vader. You're talking, what is that, 10, it's 10, 11, 12, it's about 13 years of being a, now he's not even, he's a Padawan for most of those years. So he's not even a Jedi Knight yet, really, until just after episode 2. So he's only a Jedi for about 3 years, which is during the Clone Wars, right? I mean, you can call Padawans Jedis, but they're not really. They're still learning.
They're not masters yet, yeah.
Yeah, so he never really made it to be a master. He was a knight. Now, he got put on the council as a master in episode 3, but that was because of Palpatine, not because of the council. So he never was a Jedi master.
So as a knight, though, he's allowed to take on Ahsoka to train her. You don't have to be a master to be
Correct.
A trainer.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, you don't have to be a master. You can be a Jedi Knight and have a Padawan.
Yeah.
But that was even unconventional in a sense too, remember? Because they talked about that. He's just kind of become a Jedi Knight, and it's a little strange that he becomes a Padawan. But Yoda felt like he needed that.
Yeah.
That support system there. Yeah. So the body of work isn't as long as you would think.
No, and that's surprising when you narrow it down like that. That's so how can a 3-year tenured Jedi be considered the greatest of all time when you've got other Jedi that have been Jedi Knights or Masters for 20, 30, 50 years?
Right. So then we got to look at just that body of work. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I always love the debate because I'm a big Michael Jordan fan. I grew up with Michael Jordan. You know, there's this Michael Jordan versus LeBron James thing out there right now. And when you look at body of work there, Jordan's is smaller, but there's still no argument in my mind that he is the greatest of all time. And even though he joined the Wizards later in his career and didn't do that well, you don't really think about that. And that's kind of Anakin's story, right? He turned to the dark side and became Darth Vader. So if you don't think about that, then all you got is really, like I said, those 3 years of the Clone Wars. Now, you can now argue, though, that those 3 years of the Clone Wars was probably the hardest time for Jedi. Some Jedis never experienced war like that.
Yeah, good point.
And that is very hard to deal with because you not only have, I mean, you just have a lot of death going on around you. You have a lot of, dark side emotions happening. And at the same time, he's married when he shouldn't be married.
Yeah, right.
Right? And he's dealing with love and compassion and trying to survive for his wife. So you can make the argument that he's got more pressure and more responsibility on his shoulders than any other Jedi usually has because they're not married, right? So
all the emotion that comes with that too, like
absolutely, and obviously that played into a lot of why he turned to the dark side. But when you're looking at training Ahsoka, and that's where this comment from Filoni really came from, right? Mm-hmm. Ahsoka was trained by the greatest of all time, and that training happened during the Clone Wars, right? Because by the end of the Clone Wars, Ahsoka walked away from the Jedi. We were introduced to her, obviously, at the beginning of the Clone Wars, so we only see her for those 3 years. And yes, it is, you kind of almost have to put Ahsoka almost in the equation because she is the only person officially trained by Anakin. It's not like these other guys that have multiple apprentices. And look now what Ahsoka has become. Now, she left the Jedi Order, but she has never turned, she has never wavered in her belief system of helping and being a better part of the galaxy, a better person for the galaxy. she has arguably become the greatest non-Jedi to ever be. Right?
The greatest Padawan, maybe?
The greatest Padawan, the greatest, just servant of the light side, wherever you want to call it. So there's even though there's only 3 years, there is a great deal of responsibility, of effort, of training that Anakin experienced, as well as love. It's a time frame that most Jedi don't experience in their whole lifetimes, right? So the body of work, even though it's small, it is grander in some scale.
Yeah.
Than someone like, I'm just thinking like any one of those other guys on the, Kiadi Mundi or Plo Koon that are masters on the Jedi Council at that point. I don't know their full histories, but they've been around a while. But I would argue that probably Anakin experienced more in those 3 years than they did their entire lifetime on the council.
Even compare his own son, Luke.
Absolutely.
Look at where Luke comes into play. He becomes a Jedi when there isn't any Jedi left. So, we all love Luke. He was the heart of our story for the first trilogy. But can you really put Luke even in the same stratosphere as Anakin as greatest of all time? Because it takes Luke a long time to even get close to the level of skill. And we don't even know if he's up there yet.
No, I don't think he ever gets there. No.
So, yeah.
But then, obviously we're talking about also the Jedi that we only know about. I mean, we now know that there's been 25,000 years of Jedi. To say that Anakin's the greatest of all time, it's hard because we don't, there's thousands and thousands of Jedi that we don't know the stories of.
Right.
But like you said, he is considered the chosen one. So, and by far, it's mentioned in episode 1 that he has on record the person with the most midi-chlorian count ever.
Even more than Yoda?
Even more than Yoda.
Yeah.
So that's saying something right there. I mean, that's putting him in a different class right there. Skill level, sensing the Force, abilities, things like that.
Yep.
So to be honest, going into this discussion with all the things I just said, I still am not decided yet. I feel like I'm kind of making the argument that he is, but I'm also taking in the weight of the body of work being so small and the fact that you still can't overlook, even though you don't have to take in effect because he's Darth Vader at this point, but you still have to take in effect that he did turn. And that is a big flaw. That is a big flaw because like you said, Obi-Wan never turned. Yoda never turned. Mace Windu never turned. You've got these great Jedi that were able to stick to the code, stick to their beliefs, and Obi-Wan even more because we know that he was tempted with love, with
Satine.
With Satine. Yeah. So,
but let me interject. Like Yoda, Obi-Wan, Mace, these guys. Yes, they never turned, but they also never had the Emperor come after them. I mean, Emperor Palpatine is the greatest Sith of all time, you could argue. His manipulation power is unmatched. If he had to come after Obi-Wan, or like who knows what would happen. So,
but again, does that spell weakness though? The weakness that Anakin may have, because when he discovers in episode 3, when he discovers that Palpatine is Sidious, I mean, he could have killed him right there, and everything would have been fine. Like he would have been he would have easily went on to be the greatest Jedi probably of all time.
Yeah.
But he was manipulated, and manipulation usually happens to weak people, right? Or weak, or he's playing on his emotions, obviously, right? He's opened up his heart to ways to be manipulated because of his compassion and his love for Padme.
Right.
So is that a check mark on the flaw side of him not being? Because if you did go after Obi-Wan, or if you did go after Mace, would they have been less tempted? Would they have not given in? I would probably argue that they wouldn't have.
It's hard to say. I mean,
it is hard to say.
I still think Obi-Wan would probably be the strongest one to stand against it. I think.
I agree.
Because of the tribulations that he went through, and he still was able to say to not let his emotions overtake him.
Yes. And we saw within his series how low he got with his life.
Yeah,
he was still able to come back. So, it's funny because when we started doing these council sessions, the first episode we did in this series was, who is the greatest Jedi? And my argument was obviously Yoda. And I think Casey, who was with me at the time, his argument was Obi-Wan. And so we didn't even bring up Anakin, I don't think, in that discussion. So
now, is that personal favorite choice though, or you legitimately think greatest of all time?
No, I think we were, if I remember correctly, he made Obi-Wan's case because of his survival through all of the dark times.
Yeah.
Yoda as well, but Yoda, my argument was mainly, I think, centered around longevity. Like you said, he's been around so many years, is able to survive, has trained countless and countless numbers of Jedi. I mean, he trained younglings, so he almost trains everybody in a sense.
Right.
And, Yoda's always, he's always been strong with, the feeling of the Force and using it for good. And, there's never been a bad story about Yoda. So,
yeah,
I think longevity but the survival Obi-Wan is pretty big. But I think you can still make an argument for Anakin. I think there's an argument there. Again,
if you just focus on his Clone Warriors, like we both brought up, you can't, everybody was in awe of him. Even Obi-Wan was in awe. Yoda was in awe. Everybody was like, wow, look at what Anakin can do. Mm-hmm. None of us can do what he can do. So if you got all of the other Jedi looking at him on a higher pedestal themselves, that kind of sells the argument right there that they think he's better than all of them. And he was a little bit cocky. He knew it, but he just did what he did. He always did things that nobody else could do. When Obi-Wan was going, whoa, no, this situation's too tough, Anakin's like, nah, I got it. And he runs in there solo and solves the problem.
Yeah.
He just did things that nobody else could do or would be even willing to do. That to me is a strong enough argument that during that period of time, he was the greatest. Mm-hmm. Because the rest of the galaxy knew it. The rest of the Jedi were like, Anakin's the one.
But there was a time though too in, mainly in episode 3, we didn't see it during the Clone Wars, but in episode 3, there was that conversation that Yoda, Mace, and Obi-Wan had, and Mace was even saying like, I don't trust him.
Yeah.
It's dangerous waters, and Obi-Wan's like, well, isn't he the chosen one? And they kept saying, well, maybe the prophecy, maybe we misinterpreted the prophecy. Maybe he's not the chosen one.
Right.
So they questioned him, obviously, and they questioned, Yoda or Mace. I remember you just always said, there's emotion clouding your judgment. They sensed that too in him, that there was a lot of conflict.
Yeah.
About how he should, make the decisions based on the survival of his wife, which ultimately leads to the dark side. Attachment, fear. Just fear of losing somebody is the road to the dark side. So I don't know. I think I agree. I think the 3-year body of work with the Clone Wars, it's just pretty unparalleled.
Yeah.
But I got to think about the turn.
Well, the turn and leading up to the turn, because we now saw in Obi-Wan Kenobi's own series, and we saw in episode 3, how can you really give Anakin the crown of greatest of all time when Obi-Wan single-handedly defeats him twice?
That's true.
And yes, the fights were good fights, but it always seemed like Obi-Wan had the upper hand. Like, it never seemed like he relinquished the battle to Anakin at all. Maybe in the Obi-Wan TV show, there was a time when Vader was kicking his butt a little bit. But it doesn't matter. Obi-Wan still overcame both battles and beat him one-on-one. So that kind of is like, give me the crown. I'm the greatest of all time.
Yes.
So,
and one little side note I will say too is I think if he were able to defeat Palpatine or Sidious, if he were able to realize that Padme would be okay,
right?
If he killed Sidious and there would be no more Sith, I think he would have proven. I think he would have actually proven to the Jedi Order that you can have attachments, that you can be married and love somebody and still be a Jedi. Because I think he would have been okay doing that. I think that says something too, again, I think it wasn't the fact that his love and his marriage was the deciding factor on why he turned. It was the manipulation that Palpatine or Sidious gave to him ultimately, that you could only save her if you follow me.
Yeah.
Right. So if that wasn't there, I think he could have shown that, compassion, like what he said in episode 2, compassion is essential to a Jedi's life.
Well, and you're leading into what my argument was about Anakin, Luke, and Rey, how they use their emotions to benefit them in the Force. Anakin was the first one to really do it, and he lost control. But again, he had Palpatine manipulating him. Luke didn't have that. Well, I guess Palpatine tried, but Palpatine definitely didn't put in the years of effort that he gave to Anakin.
Right.
He only met Luke once or twice and, tried, but it wasn't enough. Same with Rey. I mean, same thing. He didn't meet Rey until the very end. So, Luke and Rey were able to overcome that using their own emotions and use it for the way, to fight for the good side. It's just Anakin couldn't. He had too much going on. I mean, Luke, if you think of Luke and Rey, I mean, they didn't have a marriage or kids or family to be used against them.
Right.
In that sense. Darth Vader was already turned, so it wasn't like he was trying to save him. Luke was trying to bring him back to the light side, but it's a different situation. So I think Anakin had the stakes set so high against him that I don't know if anyone could have maybe stood up to that. Now that we come back to that idea, you put Obi-Wan in that same scenario. He's married. Could he give up his wife to stay to the light side? We don't know. I mean, we could just speculate. We don't know.
Mm-hmm. So where are you landing right now?
Is there a definitive answer? I don't know if there is. Clone Wars Anakin was the greatest of all time.
I think there's an easy answer to that, to be honest. If you have to think about it, I don't think he's the greatest.
Oh, so you're saying if we just say yep right off the bat?
I'm just saying, like, if there's arguments there that in aspects of it that don't make him the greatest,
right?
Like if you're thinking that this could hurt him being the greatest, or this goes against him being the greatest, then I think right away that he's not the greatest. Because if we're talking about the greatest, there's probably hardly any flaws. I mean, there's going to be some, but it doesn't really affect the overall aspect of the argument. Right now, if we're talking like, because he turned or because he was married, then I think that knocks it down. But that's maybe me. I don't know if that's the way you're thinking.
No, that's a good way to put it. I think if we have to try to encompass all of it, then there's no way that he can be the greatest of all time. I just think he was the greatest skilled of all time during the Clone Wars. If I really had to pick it, if we want to get into that part of the conversation, I would probably go to Obi-Wan as my choice. Overall, if we bring in every aspect, every angle that we've talked about tonight, I think Obi-Wan even more so than Yoda, because Yoda, in all of his years of knowledge and experience, he doesn't allow emotion to come into play at all. And I think he's made some bad decisions because of that. Whereas Obi-Wan, maybe Obi-Wan he didn't get married and he doesn't allow himself to be with Satine, but he did love her and he expressed it. And he does show compassion. He showed compassion towards Anakin. We see how much emotion Obi-Wan shows when he's trying to save Anakin. Mm-hmm. We see him with, Luke Skywalker in his later days. We see him with Leia. We see him with all these people. He expresses a lot of compassion. So I think he really stands on that line of, I can feel and care for people. I just can only take it so far. He seems to know where the line is that he cannot cross, and he doesn't allow himself to cross. So I think that sense of control in being able to use both sides of, I need compassion to care for people. Otherwise, how am I supposed to help them if I don't care about them? Versus when you look at Yoda and some of the other council members, they seem to make decisions based on what they think is the right way or what's the best option. They don't care about emotions or who it's going to hurt or if they're going to lose somebody. They're like, that doesn't matter. This is the right path to go. And which I think, like I said, it hasn't made the best choices all the time. Whereas Obi-Wan, it seems like he always makes the best choice for all that's involved, which I think is a fair way for me anyway, to allow him to be the greatest. So even though the question was, is Anakin the greatest? I think
well, you're clearly saying no, he's not. So that's part of it. But I think, the flip side of that argument a little bit though is, with Yoda especially, our argument can be made that is the path of the Jedi, right? To not allow emotion to be affecting the decision making at all. I think
if that's how you believe the Jedi are supposed to be,
right? Well, that's what we're told, is that
emotionless
emotion. You cannot, I mean, it's not, but there's not the absence of emotion. That's why I think, George put that scene in episode 3 between Yoda and Anakin. I think that was a great explanation of really the difference between how Anakin was thinking and how Yoda, who represents the Jedi in a sense, more so was thinking. He's like, mourn them, do not, people that die, mourn them, do not, feel bad for them, do not, for they have gone to where we want to be eventually. Right. Celebrate that. Don't be so attached to the loss. We have to be happy about that. And of course, Anakin's like, I'm not gonna. What are you talking about? I don't want to lose her. I'm afraid to lose her. I don't want that feeling of loss.
Yeah.
So you can. I can see where someone can say, well, that's being emotionless. Not caring. But I think Yoda cares. He just knows that he can't let it affect his decision making on what's best for the council and then ultimately the Jedi. So, but I agree. I'm probably back and forth. I do not think that Anakin is the greatest Jedi of all time. I did make the argument that Yoda was. But after the Obi-Wan series, like
I know, right?
He's pretty awesome.
But here's another point to throw in. Dave Filoni says he's the greatest of all time, and we know Dave Filoni is like the Padawan of George Lucas. What if there's something in the background that we don't know about that George Lucas was filling him with that knowledge? Like, when I wrote all these characters, I wrote Anakin as the greatest of all time. Maybe that's just in his mind and he just blurted it out without any revealing any background to that, but maybe it's a George Lucas thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he and George probably talked about it for a long time.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I totally think that's right. that George probably looks at Anakin, but I think George looks at Anakin as the chosen one,
Yeah.
And maybe that the potential was that he was supposed to be the greatest of all time, but then, of course, he made the mistake of turning. So Filoni probably had, yeah, you're right. I think he has that history with George that made him say that. Or he said it, and then, right after it was over, he's like, did I actually just say he was the greatest? Because maybe
yeah,
I didn't.
Exactly, which we don't see. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Whoops. Probably after all the internet blew up from that.
Exactly.
From that
exactly.
comment. Oh, man.
But there is no argument that without maybe even knowing it, he may have been one of the greatest trainers with what has happened with Ahsoka.
Yeah. It's funny because I think I brought this up when we were talking Inside the Force. Like, when you talk about the Jedi not having emotion, and maybe that's the way they're supposed to be, I can't help but mixing the two worlds, that emotionless Jedi, or the way that they control their emotions and tamper them down and say, we can't use emotion to influence our decisions. Doesn't that sound a lot like Vulcans in Star Trek?
Yeah.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
Vulcans, they stamp down their emotions so it doesn't affect how they go about their business in their life.
Yeah. It's all logic. It's all based on logic. Right?
Yeah. It's all, so that's what Jedi are Vulcans, or vice versa. That's
Yep.
so.
No, that's good. That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I think we did definitely go longer than usual on a council sessions, but that was a good discussion. That was great. Love
Not
to
a
hear,
record breaker.
Love to hear everybody else's opinions on Anakin as the greatest Jedi of all time, or who is the greatest Jedi of all time. I think, there's a whole slew of Jedi that we're hopefully going to be getting stories about in the coming years. There's a whole library of Jedi that we've gotten from the Old Republic. I don't think they're possibly in any of these discussions yet, but we'll see, and then we're getting, of course, Dawn of the Jedi at some point, the new Jedi Order with Rey. I mean, Rey could end up being in the argument as well at some point.
You're reading my mind. I think I was throwing you some Force vibes there, because look at Rey. What happened to her at the end of Rise of Skywalker? She had all the Jedi send her some power to help overcome Palpatine in the end. Could that now make her the greatest or most powerful Jedi of all time? She harnessed everybody for that fight, right? So,
Yep.
And she's got the Jedi texts, the ancient volumes of knowledge. She's got all of that, and she's basically starting from scratch. She truly is the last Jedi, right?
Yes.
So at her point in time, she's the greatest of all time because she's the only one.
Jeez. That's right. That's right. It'd be great. It's going to be great to see what comes of her. And what comes of Ahsoka as we get ready for Ahsoka here in a few weeks.
Yes.
Of course, check out Inside the Force. We'll be talking about that. And, of course, the Mandalore podcast. We'll be covering each episode. Big deep dives. As only Martin knows how to write up. And we'll be doing that every Sunday night. Get your feedback in over there. And we'll be talking about it a little bit here, top line with Hannah over here on Inside the Force. And then we're going to do a slew of these council sessions, I'm sure, because there will be a lot of questions that come up with this series.
Yeah.
And, the biggest one, if everybody wants to, remember me and you, I think we and you went back and asked the question, where is Ezra Bridger?
Yeah.
Do you remember? That was me and you, right? Was that me and you?
We did talk about it. I don't remember if that was a council session question. I
think it was a council session question.
Okay.
There is one that we have done. That's where is Ezra Bridger? I need to go back and listen to it again.
Yeah, that wasn't me for sure.
Oh, it wasn't you? Okay.
No.
I'll see what that is, but I'll repost that because that was a good discussion. I'm curious. I got to go back and listen and see if our predictions come true eventually.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Hopefully we find out where he is. All right. Thanks, Martin, as always.
Thank you, as always. Fun to be here.
Come back here, youtube.com/Inside the Force for more council sessions, Beyond the Sagas, Dark Knowledge, Inside the Force, all that stuff. And of course, we're on all the podcast feeds weekly on Inside the Force, the Mandalore podcast. Go check that out. Subscribe, get your feedback in, and we'd love to hear from you. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time. May the Force be with you.